guys, welcome Sunday night. I know I said I was not doing a video tonight, but things changed. So I was looking into some stuff because even on my live shows, it's kind of getting repetitive. Not that you guys are getting repetitive, but we keep going through the same stuff. So I wanted to find some different stuff, and oh boy, did I find it. Now, let me state, you guys know I'm honest as can be. I can take credit for none of this. I didn't find any of it. All I did was research it, and my faithful subscribers know, who've been with me for a long time, that I am totally honest. I will never try to take credit for something that isn't mine, and I will always let you guys know if it's mine. This is totally not mine. The only thing that I can take credit for is that I researched it and confirmed it. And I'll show you guys that too. So let me start off with who gets the credit on this. TikTok Manitowoc and the GeorgeZipper.com. I didn't realize GeorgeZipper.com was involved until I found something else. So there's a lot of info. So I'm just going to get right to it. I am going to premiere it. Because I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions about it, which I'm totally cool with. It just won't, my premiere won't go for like 3 hours. It's only going to go for the length of the video. So at least we could still discuss it while we're watching it. So you see right here, it says, following facts are presented. This is just a hearing, has nothing to do with Stephen Avery, but it's a hearing. Following facts were presented in 1995 through 3 law enforcement officers, one of them being the Wisconsin Department of Justice Special Agents Kathy Williford. Now, it's very important you keep that C for Kathy in your mind, and I'll show you why in a minute. So following this, then you have the interview that Weigert did with the Kathy D. Williford, that she used to work for, Auto Trader magazine in 2005, in April of 2005. Now, originally, when TikTok Manitowoc posted this, by the way, 1/4 is my birthday. When TikTok Manitowoc posted this, I told him he was crazy. It's 2 different names, that it's not the same person. Like he's being conspiracy theory again, which we all know I don't get into. Then I did a lookup of her, and this is really interesting. If you look up Kathy Williford, it comes up Kathy D. Williford in Sheboygan. And I did everything possible to look up Kathy Williford. I couldn't find it. There's no Kathy with a C. The special agent is Kathy D. Williford. Now you think, where did I see that name? Right here. Kathy D. Williford. I keep cutting over it. Kathy D. Williford, which is really interesting. And 68, that would leave her in her 50s. So now, let's cross over to Zipper's file. The original Making a Murderer, which was posted on November 1st, say police dogs originally tracked Teresa remains to the Manitowoc gravel site. Kathleen contends, they mean Zellner, that something happened to Teresa prior to her remains being found on the Avery property. Well, we all kind of knew that. But the fact that the police dogs originally tracked her to the Manitowoc gravel site. So here he leaves some information about where Kratz Road is, where the Avery salvage yard is, and everything. TikTok Manitowoc wrote just yesterday, why are there so many oddities to the statement in Casso? January 2005, walks to his door. Avery is inside 10 minutes. She felt creeped out. So I know TH visited her in May of 2005. If she was so creeped out, why didn't she warn TH about her experience? Now, let's also add, Ken never writes him back. He's as scared of TikTok Manitowoc as he is of anyone else. So then he wrote, so many things about her bothered me. So I dug. And what do you know? In 1995, a Kathy Williford pops up as a DOJ special agent in an appeal. Oh, and if you try to search DOJ Special Agent Kathy Williford online, it all comes up to Kathy D. Williford, and that's exactly correct. We see that here. You pull up Kathy Williford, and you get Kathy D. Williford. There is no Kathy with a C, which is extremely interesting and a bit shocking. So then he goes on to say that found it odd that Angela Schuster of Auto Trader said in a DCI interview that she thinks Williford works for the state of Wisconsin. So if you're a special agent, why in the hell would you be a thing for Auto Trader? Why would you be a photographer for Auto Trader? And her Casso interview is completely out there with her statement. So many oddities. Um, I found it particularly odd a photographer with AT suddenly jump into the ranks of a state employee. Absolutely. Kathy Williford she's in the new Convicting a Murderer trailer as the "it could have been me" sobbing moron. I haven't seen it, but I trust his instinct on that. An online search of Kathy links right back to the one in the documentary. So now Strass is calling 11-4, almost a full day before the RAV4 is found, to Casso, offering her help to investigate Steven because she is quote unquote not a fan of that guy. Makes sense. DOJ set up all the way. Not so sure how much of the DOJ is involved, but let's see. And I agree that this could be huge. So she went undercover as a photographer prior to the death of Teresa. Either that or her statement is fabricated to present the Avery as creepy status. If she stepped onto the property as an agent of the DOJ 10 months before TH was killed, then we are talking about a major conspiracy to frame him. I'm not enough of a conspiracy theorist to think that, so I am more than willing to say that they just used her to create the Stephen Creep TH out aura with her Casso statement to corroborate Ken's claims. Now, I totally agree with him. I can't deny it. That is a big, far stretch to that. That, the DOJ was involved in, they were setting him up a year ahead of time. Totally weird. But it really does leave you open to think so much more could have happened. And they give the address. I don't really care if anyone, sees it. I don't know if she still lives there or not. So then it goes on to talk about his Calumet County's interview with her. Again, my birthday, guys, don't forget, 1-4. Kathy drove up to the residence. I don't need to read this to you guys. You guys can see this yourself. Kathy stated that the only time she had been to the Avery residence, and then she quit working for Auto Trader in April. According to Kathy, when she was taking pictures for Auto Trader, she used a Nikon Coolpix 2100. Kathy states after she quit working, had come to the residence, she believes the month of May, and picked up her camera for the Auto Trader. According to Kathy, Teresa was already working for Auto Trader before Kathy quit working there. I asked her how she knew this, to which Kathy stated that she had seen her name on a roster of employees. In speaking with Kathy, she stated that she talked with Teresa. Teresa had stated she had to pick up her camera up, and she mentioned something about Auto Trader having a storage facility. Teresa told Kathy that every once in a while Auto Trader had her go to the storage facility. I ended my interview with Kathy at approximately 18:10. It would literally explain many of the missing pieces and a lot of the what the fucks in the case. Habak family behaviors for starters, and then all this shit unravels. I am suddenly reminded of Sam Regay's statement in 2005. SA's lawsuit was Manitowoc's biggest nightmare. KZ is about to make that nightmare look like a happy place. So this was at stake. SA civil suit. Those exposed not covered by state town insurance, loss of jobs, pensions, Social Security. Penny B would sue victims of assaults, rape of Gregory Allen. Then the golden goose of all would be the full exposure of the cases in the crime lab. This was a huge, huge motivation. And then it says, feel free to add other areas of exposure. My biggest ones is right here. The loss of job, pension, social status, the whole nine. I think it was even bigger than this, to be honest with you. Then people go on to say that, she wasn't really killed or whatever, which I don't believe. But also says that found out that Schuster said in her DCI interview that she thinks, I covered that already. So this goes on to cast a file with Jody's stepfather, said his coworker told him that there was more going on than was coming out. And involved Martinez. And this goes on this whole thing to say, another one from about Teresa, Bartha's stepfather of Jody, who we all know is here's Stephen's ex. Telephone indicated stepfather may have some information regarding going on at his Avery Auto Salvage on 1031. And speaking with Barth, he indicated a coworker named David Trice, currently incarcerated at Columbia Correctional Facility for operating while intoxicated charges, told Barth some time ago a female Trice knows stated to him there was more to the story regarding the Halbach Avery situation. Barth believes this involves the individual who struck his girlfriend in the face with a hatchet. I'm pretty sure that's the German guy. Martina, according to Barth, Trice had talked about a female who had gone to the Averys for some reason, possibly to pick up parts for a vehicle, a friend, or some children. According to Barth, Trice had made out the comment to him that they were out there and there was more going on than what was coming out. Barth did advise us Trice was aware of the fact that Jody was living with Stephen Avery at the time this discussion took place. Martina stated he was friends with Stephen Avery, and it goes on, but it's been a long time since I read these files, but I don't remember this particular case. This particular report. Even though it was done in 2007, I just don't remember reading that Jody's stepfather said all these things. So if you guys remember, great. I apologize, but I don't remember it at all. Goes into Martinez. Then they talk about other stuff. There was something else from here. Sheriff of MC then makes the best of a bad thing, uses Carmen Bones' setup SA. He has her blood on file, just enough from a vial to make the SUV look like a crime happened. And if needed, TH would donate her blood so that it appeared she was dead to the cartels. This right here is the conspiracy that I don't agree with. This right here is what gives true followers a bad name. It's comments like that. That I don't like. And it's that kind of stuff that people just, there are real facts for us to look at, and there's a lot of real things that we can base it on. We don't need stupid stuff like this. All right, now moving forward. I thought that was really interesting. There's some of the stuff that I don't remember, and there's other stuff that I did not know, like this stuff about her. Absolutely did not know that. Fascinated by it. And I'm telling you, I called out TikTok. I was like, it's two different people. Like, just going by the names before I looked it up. And then I looked it up, and no, he's right. I'll show you guys again. If you look up Kathy Williford in Wisconsin, you get Kathy Dawn Williford, who's in her 50s, who lived in Waldo. Very interesting. And here's who she's connected to. So that's serious. I believe that 110%. So another thing TikTok was talking about, if you don't know, if you're not familiar, is, I don't know who Michelle Laurie is or what her podcast is, so if anyone knows, let me know. But obviously, she was big enough to get Ken Kratz on, unlike us little people. But he talked about, I guess Ken had said that Bennett Gershman might be a crackpot or something, or that he wasn't credible, is my guess. Well, guess what I found out? So I pulled up the file, and let me just state that the guy is is a professor at Pace University, Pace Law School. Pace Law School is 120 best law schools in the entire country, according to best law schools, or best schools. I forgot the name of the website that does it. But, I grew up not far from there. Pace is an excellent school. So this guy definitely knows what he's talking about. He has credentials that Kratz wishes that he had. Like, literally, wishes that he had. He's been an expert. I'm not going to read through all of this. It's a big file. I'm sure some of you guys have read it, some of you are not. I'm a little slow on catching up to all the CASO from recent, and I'm sure I read this file at some point, but kind of skimmed through it. I mean, there's a lot of files on this case. I feel for Zelna, I'll tell you that much. So, just to give you an idea of his, credibility, he's not only an attorney, he's been done a lot of stuff with the Wisconsin, done a lot of stuff with New York. He put together a, let me go, because I forget, but he put together the dishonest conduct, and he was the chief of appeals bureau at the Bronx Anti-Corruption Bureau, where I investigated cases, presented cases to special grand juries, and prosecuted many public officials, including judges, prosecutors, attorneys, police officers, and other public officials charged with corrupt, fraudulent, and dishonest conduct. What I can tell you about that growing up in one of the 5 boroughs is that the Bronx is hardcore crime. Like, it's bad. I mean, one street may be nice, but you go next door to the South Bronx, it's bad. My dad grew up there. It's a bad, bad area. And it wasn't then when my dad grew up, but it is now. I mean, you stay out of the Bronx. Anyway, so, I mean, you guys, I'll leave a link on the description box, but you can see this guy's a serious dude. Like, he's a no bullshit guy. He's been teaching since '76. He's taught criminal law, criminal procedure. I mean, he knows his stuff. He's frequently consulted as an expert on criminal procedure, prosecutorial misconduct, and professional ethics. So without further ado, let me just tell you what he points out as what Kratz did wrong. And I completely agree with him. And I'm certainly not an expert. Kratz's statements at his press conference constituted professional misconduct. Kratz charging Stephen Avery based on Brendan Dassey's confession constituted professional misconduct. Kratz's attempt to introduce in evidence allegations of Stephen Avery's prior wrongful acts constituted professional misconduct. Kratz's pursuit of inconsistent and irreconcilable theories at the separate trials of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey constituted professional misconduct. Kratz's request for an aiding and abetting instruction in the Avery trial constituted professional misconduct. Kratz's public dissemination of inflammatory information about Stephen Avery constituted professional misconduct. And Kratz's jailhouse contacts with Stephen Avery constituted professional misconduct. That's a lot of professional misconduct. Now, where has he given his opinions before? He lists A through N of different cases he's given his opinion on. Some of them are older. Some of them are up to, 2017. In preparing, these are all the things that he read for it. And then he goes on to talk about Kratz's press conferences. If I read this whole thing to you, we'll be here for 5 hours. And I really didn't have a chance to highlight it because I kind of wanted to get the information from TikTok Manitowoc out. So I apologize for that. I did highlight a couple things, not much though. But I started to do it. I realized it's going to take me forever. But I did do that. It goes into his professional misconduct or things he did. This skips around. But as a prosecutor, the press conference is the most powerful forum in which to communicate to the public. Press conference gives a prosecutor the opportunity to express in a dramatic way the results of an investigation, the crimes being charged, and the involvement of persons accused of committing those crimes. Now, before I go on, let me just say why I'm even reading certain parts is because I don't think a lot of people truly understand how fucked up that press conference was and how much impact it had. And a lot of people, a lot of guilters too, think it's no big deal. A lot of guilters say, hey, you know what? It's not a big deal. Or, all right, so maybe it was wrong, but, jurors are smart. I mean, I've heard every excuse under the sun. But what you're not realizing, the impact of that press conference was so major, probably one of the most major things that I've seen in any trial that I've ever studied, any police report, any everything. It was huge, and it was the biggest farce. I mean, that should have been a mistrial right then and there, and I honestly can't believe they didn't. So that's why I'm reading it. Plus, as I've said before, I have deaf, subscribers as well who need the, written. So that's why I'm saying it as well. Because there is a risk that the press conference to prejudge I can't think of for some reason can't pronounce it, the right of an accused to a fair trial. Ethics rules strictly circumscribe what a prosecutor can say at a press conference. While a prosecutor is allowed to make statements that serve a legitimate law enforcement purpose, as for example, the substance of the charges, the circumstances of an arrest, and the identity of the defendants, a prosecutor is prohibited from making comments that would have a substantial likelihood of materially prejudicing an adjudicative proceeding, or that have a substantial likelihood of heightening public condemnation of the accused. I've cotton mouth and I'm having a hard time reading big words. I am ABA model rules, and that's Wisconsin rules of professional conduct. So based on that alone, can you please tell me why there wasn't a mistrial? Now, again, I'm going to say, I have stated over and over and over, I do not believe this conspiracy was huge. I do not believe that a lot of people knew what they were doing. But in reality, according to this guy, the way I'm reading it, they kind of did. And these people had to have known, because why wasn't this quoted as a mistrial? Two reasons, in my opinion. One, because the judge is an asshole and the judge was in on it. Or two, because the lawyers never asked for it. And I truly, in my gut and everything I know about this case, it's the second one. I totally believe that nobody asked for it, so they never got it. And even if the judge knew about it, one thing I did learn from my own cases is that a lawyer has to ask for it to happen. Even if a judge sees it, even if a judge knows about it, even if a judge wants to call a mistrial, he cannot do it unless an attorney asks for it. So, in my professional opinion, that's what I think happened. I just think nobody asked for it and the judge couldn't do it. I mean, I know like Dumb and Dumber asked for something on a mistrial for the juror or whatever, and they didn't get it. But right here, according to the Wisconsin rule book, they needed to do a mistrial, and they didn't, because Dumb and Dumber never asked for it. Then I skipped over. It says, which Kratz called the largest, I went on. Kratz held several press conferences in connection with the Avery case, but two are notable, the one on March 1st and March 2nd, given the sensational nature of the case. The next day, on March 2nd, Kratz held the press conference. After warning children not to watch, which we all saw, Kratz related to the huge assembled media and a live TV audience the horrific details in Brendan Dassey's confession of how he was invited into Avery's trailer, saw Teresa Halbach naked, shackled to Avery's bed, and how he and Avery repeatedly raped, tortured, and gruesomely butchered her to death. Kratz's sensational presentation was based exclusively on Brendan Dassey's confession. Kratz knew that there was no evidence to corroborate Dassey's confession and implicate Stephen Avery, even though the police for the previous 4 months had exhaustively searched Avery's trailer, garage, and other parts of the property. Kratz also knew that this new account of the rape, torture, murder of Teresa Halbach contradicted virtually every fact Kratz had alleged in his original criminal complaint against Avery. The place where Teresa, I skipped over one, place where, that was 12, place where Teresa Halbach was killed, the garage, the weapon used, and the cause of death, to the head. Kratz asserted that we have now determined what occurred sometime between 3:45 and 10 or 11 on October 31st. He then proceeded to recount for the media, the viewing audience, and ultimately a nationwide audience the following allegations. Before I read that, I just want to bring up a good point, is that Kratz was obviously aware that anything he said would have a powerful impact on public opinion in the case. Thus, on March 1st, several months after Avery had originally been charged with the Halbach murder, Kratz announced significant developments in the case. He told the large throng of media attendees that law enforcement now has a definitive set of answers to what happened to Teresa Halbach. He asserted that as he was speaking, a search warrant was simultaneously being executed on the Avery premises, and that we now know, or we know exactly what to look for and where to look for it. Do you guys now see what I was saying about that they used Brendan's confession to frame Stephen? Let's go back to what I already read, and I'll repeat what I said. Kratz also knew, no, I'm jumping ahead. Where was it? Now I forgot. Oh my God, now I lost it. I totally just lost it. Oh, you know what? Probably because it was on here. Nope, wrong one. Attendees. Okay, this is what I was looking for. So Kratz knew that there was no evidence to corroborate Dassey's confession and implicate Stephen because the police for the previous 4 months had exhaustively searched the trailer, the garage, and other parts of his property. Right there is huge. They looked for 4 months for everything. You cannot sit here and tell me that they couldn't find a bullet after they exhaustively searched for everything. Or I remember correctly, they dug up cement in the garage, if I'm not mistaken. So I find that right there is huge, because Kratz likes you to believe, or it led you to believe, or led a lot of people to believe it, even Making a Murderer did, that they only looked on the 7th and 8th, and then once they had him, they didn't go back and look until March. But that's completely not true. They looked for 4 months and found nothing. So what did they do? That's where they had to call Brendan in. And that's where they had to bust Brendan. Now, what I'm doing with all these different things is what I discussed in last night's video, is just connecting the dots. When you connect the dots, they make it easy to connect the dots, you see everything start to come together. And that's how I see this. I'm starting to see the whole big picture and have it come together. And why, a lot of people still ask, well, why they need Brendan? You know, they already had this, they already had that. Well, according to this, and I haven't studied things the way this guy has studied them, but when you connect the dots, they absolutely had to need Brendan. Why? Because for 4 months they looked and found nothing. They couldn't even find blood. They didn't find a needle. They didn't find a key. They didn't find anything. They found, not a key, they already had that. They did not find a gun or nothing until Brendan confessed. That ties the dots of why they absolutely needed Brendan to confess and why they pulled all the information out of him to confess. So moving on, I think that was all I copied, and then I gave up. I said, you know what, I'm just going to go through it. So Kratz, to a national audience, said the following. Avery, partially dressed and full of sweat, invites Dassey, his 16-year-old nephew, into the trailer. And guys, I know my voice is not mucho sexy voice, but it still sounds better than Kratz. So hopefully when you guys hear this, you think of my voice and not Kratz's voice. So try not to hear Kratz in it. Teresa Halbach, completely naked and shackled to the bed, screams louder and louder for help. Avery invites Dassey to sexually assault Halbach, telling him that he has repeatedly sexually assaulted her already. Dassey proceeds to sexually assault Teresa Halbach, who begged the 16-year-old for help. Avery watches as his 16-year-old nephew rape this woman. Avery compliments Brendan on what a good job he did. Avery tells Brendan of his intent to murder Teresa Halbach. Brendan watches as Stephen takes a butcher knife from the kitchen and stabs Teresa in the stomach. Avery, while Teresa Halbach is begging for her life after he gets stabbed in the stomach, hands a knife to the 16-year-old boy and instructs him to cut her throat. Now, mind you, this is all in the trailer. Brendan cuts Teresa Halbach's throat, but she doesn't die. And Avery and Dassey together sadistically inflict on Teresa Halbach additional torture, additional mutilation, additional mechanisms of death, which include manual strangulation and gunshot wounds. Give me a fucking break. And the reason why I'm saying give me a break, so all of this, and yet not 1 ounce of evidence, but Stephen's trailer was still a mess. It's not even logic. There's no logic in it. You can't even connect the dots in this, because when you connect the dots, it brings you to 15,000 different places. It's not true. Kratz concluded the press conference by expressing how heartbroken he was to tell Teresa Halbach's family the fate of Teresa. Kratz ended by saying, as we sit here today, the individuals that knew Teresa will remember this extraordinary woman and the joy that she brought. So he goes on to say, Kratz's statements at his press conference constituted professional misconduct. Kratz, an experienced prosecutor, knows that a prosecutor is not allowed to disparage the character and reputation of an accused, disclose the existence of a confession or other physical evidence, discuss any information that is likely to be admissible in evidence, and, if disclosed, would create a substantial risk of produce, I can't even say the word right now, prejudicing an impartial trial, and express an opinion on a defendant's guilt. I'm not going to read the whole thing over and over, but I mean, that right there, why did Dumb and Dumber not ask for a mistrial? How many people were actually involved in this? We all knew that this was a mistrial, but why didn't anyone ask for it? I just can't, I don't get it. Now everyone had a definitive answers as to what happened to Teresa Halbach, and that law enforcement is executing a search warrant on the Avery property, where we know exactly what to look for and where to look for it. Of course they do, because they set them up. Kratz's statements were likely to be accepted by the public as the truth. More than any other government official, a prosecutor is viewed by the public with esteem and trust, which we know Kratz does not have either way. The public looks to the prosecutor as the official most responsible for vindicating the rule of the law and the punishing wrongdoers. Given Kratz's prestige and the prominence as the special prosecutor appointed by the governor to lead the investigation, Kratz's assertions that law enforcement had solved the case would almost certainly be greeted by the public with both relief that the perpetrators had been apprehended and outcry to punish them. Now, this I didn't remember. And I know somebody had brought it up, but I didn't totally remember it. And it's really important. So Kratz knew by this time on March 2nd press conference that every statement he made accusing Avery of the horrific acts against Teresa Halbach, shackling, raping, torturing, butchering her to death, were based exclusively on the uncorroborated confession of 16-year-old Brendan Dassey, which has recently been found by a federal court to have been coerced by police. Kratz knew that Dassey was a borderline intelligence, attended special education classes, and was known as a mild-mannered, introverted young man who was never in trouble with the law. That's not what I didn't know. I'm reading the wrong part. As head of the investigation, Kratz knew several facts. The police interrogated Dassey several times without his lawyer or parent being present, and then it goes on stuff that we already knew. In addition, saturating the media, he talked about the raping, torturing, sadistically butchering, yada, yada, yada. But there was something really, really that stood out to me. Now let's find it. And he goes on to say every rule that Kratz broke. But what I didn't remember is that he keeps going on, and I wish I wrote down what page it was on. Okay, moreover, Kratz charging Avery with a proper evidentiary. I can't believe I can't speak tonight. Evidentiary basis constitute a professional misconduct under separate ethics rule. As noted, prosecutors cannot file criminal charges without a sufficient legal basis to support those charges. I think that's every state, though. professional misconduct to a lawyer to engage in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. By charging these without a proper factual basis and then representing in official court documents and his public statements that those charges were validity brought, Kratz engaged in fraudulent, dishonest, deceitful, and misleading conduct. Kratz also engaged in professional misconduct, and he goes on and on. He names all the things that he did wrong. Mirroring his actions in the March 2nd press conference that smeared Avery's character, on June 15, 2006, Kratz moved to introduce at Avery's trial allegations of Avery's prior criminal conduct that Kratz claimed would be relevant in proving Avery's guilt. Giving already media coverage, Judge Willis sealed a motion. At the time, Kratz filed his motion. In addition to the murder and mutilation charges, Avery has also been charged sexual assault and torture based solely on Dassey's confession, which Kratz knew was not admissible against Avery. Although at this point, police investigation into Avery's involvement had lasted over 8 months, Kratz lacked any proof against Avery about sexual assault or torture charges. Kratz therefore sought to bolster his case against Avery by introducing allegations ostensibly to show that Avery had a violent and sexual assaultive disposition. Threats by Avery against his ex-wife, yada yada, his prior conviction possessing a firearm, sexual conduct, and a phone conversation with a woman about sexual innuendo. As noted above, it is professional misconduct for lawyers to make unwarranted, unmeritorious, and frivolous legal arguments. Kratz did all of this. Indeed, Judge Willis gave short shrift to Kratz's motion. He dismissed it in its entirety in unusually strong language. Judge Willis found that the proof Kratz offered bore little relationship between the offered evidence and the proper purpose, had minimal probative value, but none of it mattered because he already smeared the name completely. Clearly, the only apparent reason Kratz sought to admit these clearly admissible and blatantly inflammatory charges was to destroy Avery's character, which is what he did best. But as Judge Willis noted, and every trial lawyer recognizes, that this is specifically the type of character evidence which is prohibited. Thus, by seeking to introduce, so it was thrown out, basically. But this is where it gets interesting, and Dumb and Dumber didn't catch it. I don't think anyone caught it. Avery's trial, Kratz argued in a summation that the uncontested and uncontroverted facts proved several issues. First, he argued that uncontested and uncontroverted facts pointed to Stephen Avery as the one person who was exclusively responsible for death of Teresa Halbach. Kratz argued in a summation. There is no question about who was responsible for the death and the mutilation of Teresa Halbach. All of the evidence points to one person. That one person being responsible. I'm going to argue at the conclusion of this case who that one person is. I bet you can guess who I'm going to suggest was responsible. The facts are uncontested, uncontroverted. Stephen Avery was the last person to see Teresa alive. All the early clues pointed to one man, one person, the last person to see her alive, who's involved in a mutilation process. The evidence keeps pointing to one individual. All of the evidence points to only one person, and other suspects were checked out. There was no evidence pointing to suspects other than Avery. So tell me why the fuck Dassey's in jail. Kratz also argued, we're going to hear about gunshots to the head. The instrumental of the murder was a .22 caliber. We will actually argue that Mr. Avery held that weapon in his hands while Teresa Halbach was killed. Teresa's death caused by 2 gunshot wounds to the head. What happened to the stabbing and everything? And it goes on, and it goes on. No blood was found in the trailer since Teresa wasn't killed in the trailer, so she shouldn't be. Also stated she was not killed in the trailer. Where was Teresa killed? This is an easy answer, or at least an easy answer as it was directed by all the physical evidence in the case. Teresa Halbach was killed in the garage, and she was killed in Stephen Avery's garage. Okay? But in trying Brendan, Kratz claimed that Brendan Dassey killed Teresa Halbach, or at least participated in a killing with Avery. Kratz claimed that she was killed by Avery, stabbing her in the stomach, slitting her throat, Avery manually strangling her, and then incidentally adding a gunshot. He argued that she was killed in Avery's trailer, not in his garage. How did nobody catch this? I don't mean like one of us. I'm saying, how did lawyers not catch this? Oh, I know how. Silly me. Because, silly me, they didn't catch it because you had Len Kaczynski, who was working for Dassey, who was really working for the state. They didn't care. But, I mean, what I like about this guy's putting together, connecting all the dots like I do. Like, it's just, that's all he's doing is connecting all of it. And when you connect all of it the way he's doing it, you come up like, how the fuck did nobody catch this? But what's even more aggravating is how the fuck did the Supreme Court not catch this when you look at both files? Well, the answer is simple. They didn't have this. Why? Because they weren't looking at Avery's file. They weren't looking at Avery's case. They were only looking at Dassey's case. But in order to see the corruption that actually happened, you have to do both. You need to see both. That's the only way that it's going to make sense. I mean, connecting the dots got to go both ways. So I know that we've discussed stuff like that, but nobody ever, I mean, I'm sure you guys all know this already, but I'm excited because, wow, somebody puts the dots together like I do. Or, he's obviously a lot more educated in the law and stuff, but, like, he's doing exactly what I do. Like, you have to connect the dots and how Dassey's trial was part of Avery's trial and how it, merged with each other. So I really like that. I really like this guy. And again, I'm sorry if most of you guys have seen this already. I know I'm a little late on the bandwagon. But yeah, I just saw this tonight. Kratz's inconsistent contentions at the Avery Dassey trials violate due process as a well-prosecutor's duty to promote the truth and serve justice, yada yada. Kratz's two different theories of how killed Teresa Halbach, how she was killed, and where she was killed negate one another. His claims are inconsistent and irreconcilable. Such flip-flopping conduct by a prosecutor is inherently unfair legally and ethically and undermines the very concept of justice and the duty of a prosecutor to serve truth. That's exactly right. And then he goes on and on. Kratz requests Judge Willis to give the jury a preliminary instruction that the jury could find Avery guilty as having caused the death of Teresa Halbach or aided and abetted Brendan Dassey. However, Kratz later stated he did not want to highlight Brendan Dassey's identity because it might hurt the case. So some of the jurors quite candidly indicated in jury selection that the state should call Brendan Dassey as a witness. Kratz was worried that the jurors would think the state had the burden to call Dassey and therefore asked the judge to omit his name and substitute the word another. Judge agreed it's not a good idea to focus attention on Mr. Dassey, and then gave the jury a preliminary instruction that Avery was charged with either directly killing Teresa Halbach or by aiding and abetting another person who directly killed her. Judge Willis repeated to the jury an aiding and abetting theory for Avery's guilt of at least 11 times. I mean, and it just goes on, and this guy connects every dot imaginable. And the January 13th, this was actually like, I still can't get over this. I honestly can't. That on January 14th, Kratz wrote to Stephen Avery on his Kratz law firm letterhead, soliciting Avery's consent to meet with Kratz to discuss his case. At the time, Avery was in the state prison of, I'm not even going to say it, Wisconsin. Kratz advised Avery that he was presently in private practice and that he believed Avery's criminal appeals had concluded and that Avery was not currently represented by counsel, and he wanted to meet Avery for my own personal use, and that Avery would receive nothing of value if he agreed to talk to Kratz. Avery replied on June 18th, suggesting since Kratz was no longer working for the state, he could take Avery's appeal, that you know the case and you got Candy Avery, and that we can all get money together. 2 years later, Kratz wrote Avery 2 more letters. Avery now had been transferred to state prison. Kratz wrote him on the 10th of 2015 informing him that since Avery had not added Kratz to his visitor list, the prison authorities had canceled Kratz's visit because it would be contrary to Avery's programming there, and they didn't want me talking to you. Kratz once again solicited Avery's consent for a visit, emphasizing in bold letters, "Add me to your visitor list," that the prison authorities probably do not want you to tell your story to me, and that they can't tell you who you can tell your story to. Again, emphasizing in bold letters, that is your decision if you want to talk to me or not. Kratz stated that Avery no longer has any pending litigation, including appeals, and therefore is no conflict which exists to you speaking with me. I thought, honestly, that it was just one letter. I didn't realize that Kratz wrote him 7 times. In his last letter to Avery, dated September 6, 2015, and this is right before Making a Murderer came out. Like, keep track of those dates. Kratz refers to Avery's letter dated August 28th, in which Avery asked Kratz whether he checked out the fingerprints found on Teresa Halbach's car. Kratz apologizes for misunderstanding Avery's June 2013 letter. Kratz states, "I thought you were interested in being honest about what happened and finally telling the whole story to someone." Kratz adds, "Since I'm the person who probably knows more about your case, I hope that you would choose me to tell your story to." Kratz continues and goes on with his bullshit. This letter I knew about. I didn't know about the other ones. So maybe there's a lot I didn't know about. I apologize. But yeah, I never knew about that one. Kratz writes, "Unfortunately, you only continued your nonsense about being set up. That's too bad because you had one opportunity to finally tell all the details, but now that'll never happen." That right there is huge. And the reason it's huge is that Stephen Avery was pleading for someone to listen, and nobody was listening. And he, over and over and over, pleaded, like, "Did you do the fingerprints? Can you help me? Did you do this?" Stephen's not the brightest person. And the truth is, he's not the brightest person, therefore he's not going to do it. You know, he's automatically going to say, like, "Oh, Kratz, you want to talk to me? You must be here to help me." And it's not the way it went. So Kratz writes, "By the way, the difference between you and convicted murderers, famous convicted murderers from the past, is that they told the whole truthful story to someone and who then wrote a book about what actually happened, and people got to understand both sides. I was willing to do that for you, but if you are going to continue to lie about what happened between you and Miss Halbach, I'm not interested. If you change your mind and want to tell your story someday, please contact me. You worthless piece of shit." Kratz's approach, and then he goes on to say how wrong it is, and you know how in his experience, and it's unprecedented for a prosecutor who led one of the state's most sensational murder investigations to solicit from the person he prosecuted in cooperation trying to write a book. Goes on to say how absolutely disgusting it was. And then we get into what Kratz did. And Kratz contacted a young woman who was accused her boyfriend of domestic violence, asking her whether she was the kind of girl that liked secret contact with an older elected DA, the riskier the better. Now, before I read these, a lot of people, I know this video is super long, and I apologize. Hopefully you guys watch the whole thing, because I'm putting a lot of work into it. But a lot of people don't know exactly what was said, and that Kratz actually said in his sexting allegation. So here it is, point out blank. He accused the boyfriend of domestic violence, asking her whether she's the kind of girl that likes secret contact with an older elected DA, the riskier the better. Kratz sent the same woman 8 more inappropriate messages, including, "You may be the tall, young, hot nymph, but I am the prize. I would want you to be so hot and treat me so well that you'd be the woman. Are you that good?" Kratz, in prosecuting a parental rights termination case, told a woman who was a witness that he won't come in her mouth. And later, he was leaving on a trip to Las Vegas where he could have big-boobed women serve him drinks. Kratz commented in court to a social worker that the court reporter had big, beautiful breasts. That's some fucked up shit. Kratz tried to defend his appalling behavior towards the women by raising incredible, inconsistent, hyper-technical, and puzzling arguments. His claim was that he wanted to amicably resolve the disciplinary proceedings according to this Wisconsin Supreme Court. Goes on and on about how he's a diagnosed narcissist and everything else. To be sure, Avery was neither a client of Kratz nor a crime victim, and so his conduct toward Avery may not have been boorish and appalling the way the Wisconsin Supreme Court characterized Kratz's conduct towards the vulnerable victims of his sexual pursuits. But as a matter of professional ethics, Kratz conducted towards Avery was an intimidating, self-interested, and manipulative as it was to the woman Kratz abused. And that's very, very true. The same ugly picture depicted in Kratz's offensive sexual misconduct with women appears in Kratz's solicitation of Avery. Kratz acted out of his own self-interest in an utterly unethical, abused his professional office, and engaged in conduct prejudicial, I said it right, prejudicial to the administration of justice. Further affiant, say not, Bennett Gershman. That is a pretty powerful statement. And of course Angela, and he's got all these different things to it, and of course Angela ignored it and threw it out of court. Based on this alone, and I'm going to go through more of these, but seriously, based on this alone, it's fucking mind-blowing to me that Angela could even deny it, and how this could even get past the Supreme Court, and how they are ignoring this is impossible. You just can't ignore this. It would literally be impossible. So I have no idea how long this video went on because I can't see it because I'm using my screen, but I think it's like probably an hour. So hopefully you guys stick around to the end. Make sure you subscribe. And again, at least it was a surprise video, and I apologize if many of you guys have seen it. It's the first I'm seeing it. I know I'm horrible. It's the first I'm seeing it, so there's a lot of stuff that from the newer Casso and stuff that I've looked at before. Like, obviously I read our whole filing, but looked at before, but I'm really interested in seeing what's happening on the 20th. But again, since everyone keeps going through the same stuff, I decided to come up with something different. Even if it's old, maybe we'll have a refreshed memory. So check out my other videos, make sure you subscribe, and I will close out with a little closing. All right? Have a great night, guys. Here you go. Should have picked a different one. Peace out.